afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Ward here with Kevin Jones, and we have the next segment in Deck of the Week. Here we go. This week, what do we got?
We got the Teamer Pummeler deck that Michael Strianese, sorry, a fellow New Yorker, don't know how to pronounce that though, sorry Mike, took the top 8 of the SCG Invitational.
Yeah.
So I believe he was 7-0-1 in Standard.
Yeah, I ID'd in the last round to make the top 8.
So an undefeated record in Standard with this Teamer Pummeler deck. I think that this deck is one of the decks that gets kind of slid into like the vacuum that Marvel left behind when it got banned, as like just a worse version of Marvel and a worse version of a few other things. But when people are like trying a bunch of new mopey things that they were never allowed to do previously, I think it opens up some space for a deck like this to be decent, and evidently that was true. So
yeah. I think it's interesting. We chose this deck basically due to the fact that it was undefeated at the Invitational, and in conjunction with what you just said, I think this week, getting ready for Cincinnati, a lot of people are trying new things, and if you come to a tournament unprepared for this style of deck, it will run you over. So let's get right into it. All right, here's some of the 2-drop creatures. We have Servitor the Conduit, Voltaic Brawler, and Longtusk Cub.
Yep, so the numbers are a little weird in that you have 3 of the 2 powerful 2-drop threats. But I still think Servant is the most important because you need to be able to double spell sometimes, as in creature plus pump spell, or 2 pump spells or what have you. You know, even 2 threats in turn 4 or 5, something like that. So it makes sense to max out on Servants here, and the other 2 creatures are pretty self-explanatory, right? Cub is great.
Yeah, they're super aggressive creatures. One thing they all have in common, they're utilizing the energy mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you with Servant being the most important one, especially because this list is playing 3 colors. A lot of the traditional Pummeler decks are just red-green, and also being able to play like a Bristling Hydra, which we're going to get into a little bit later here. A turn earlier is kind of a big game.
I believe this is functionally a red-green deck in game 1. It's only really a 3-color deck post-board, right? I don't think there's a single blue card in the main deck.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil the one of or the fun of in this list, but
yeah.
The Servant is utilized in that purposes as well. We'll get into it.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. We've got the namesake card of the deck, Electrostatic Pummeler, the 4 of, 2 Bristling Hydras, and 2 Ronus the Indomitable.
So this card reads 3 mana for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy, and then you can pay 3 energy to double its power, or to give it +X/+X, where X is its power until end of turn. So the general idea is that you cast a bunch of pump spells on it, and then you double its power, and they hit them for like 16 or 20 or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the general premise behind the deck. But now it reads 3 mana, you get 3 energy, and your opponent discards an Abrade. So that's a pretty interesting card too, right? We have a split card now.
Yeah.
It's Ravenous Rats and Hatred for lethal or whatever. But Bristling Hydra is the next on the list, and I think this card is still really good.
Yeah, I like that it's next to Ronus because these 2 cards are really synergy based with each other. Playing them not only like as the curve goes out, but with Bristling Hydra just triggering Ronus to be able to attack on turn 4. And like one thing that Bristling Hydra doesn't have, Ronus gives it with evasion.
I thought you liked that they were next to each other because they're both 2-ofs and they both have a vaguely serpentine motif in their art design. But it's also okay to be excited about how they're the in-game synergy, as it is worth mentioning for sure. And I think the most interesting thing about Hydra is that it says that it gets 3 energy when it enters the battlefield. Obviously, you can use the 3 energy to give it hexproof. The idea is that it's immune to sorcery speed removal and removal drawn later on, but generally is kind of vulnerable to, in response to the trigger removal, instant speed cheap removal the turn it comes into play.
Yep.
And the idea behind this deck is to make it so that you usually have 3 energy when you cast Hydra, so it's hexproof from the go. And most of the time, bricking 1 removal spell will be enough to kill your opponent. Let alone the fact that you can brick a second one once the trigger resolves.
Yeah, the one thing this deck has in common, all of its creatures except for Ronus, and we're going to get into the next, the one of, the fun of, as I mentioned earlier, they all utilize the energy mechanic.
Mhm.
So by the time you're getting to turn 4, or maybe turn 3 off the servant, you should, like you said, have enough energy to be able to save it while the trigger, the enter the battlefield trigger is on the stack. And then lastly, I mentioned with Hydra, I just think Ronus is a huge addition to this deck just in general. Being able
Death
to
Touch
have
is sweet.
Death Touch, indestructible, but being able to give your Pummeler trample, it's also just a nice thing to not have to have.
It's a good
maybe
combo with
the larger
Pummeler anyway. It's just
Yeah.
like I'll, pump Pummeler and then pump Pummeler.
Yeah.
So that's sweet.
All right, and the one of. So you were mentioning how it is basically just a 2-color deck in the main, and there's some sideboard cards. But we do need to serve it every once in a while to untap another target creature. You never know when you're going to need to do that.
Oh yeah, because Servant produces white mana and
Yeah.
Ether Hub produces white mana, and those are the only ways to do so, right?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one of. What do you think? What do you think they're thinking with this?
I mean, it's certainly better than playing like one Glorybringer, I think.
Okay.
As just like you're usually going to have some number of other creatures in play when you have it. So like,
just
that being said, it makes your subsequent draws better. Makes Ronus really good, as you can like play it and then pump something, and then attack with the Ronus right away or whatever.
Yeah, my only concern with Ronus is that it doesn't trigger Ronus by itself. It needs an activation, and so like I don't know if it's just play testing. It just proved its worth, but I could just see this slotting in as a 3rd Bristling Hydra in the main as well.
You're just never expecting your opponent to have this.
Yeah.
Basically ever, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Like there's no reasonable line of play where you're like, oh, I should probably like not cast Glimmer here when I have Disallow or whatever because he has Samlet and is just what is more likely that they just ran out of gas and they're just playing a deck with like 20 stupid pump spells in it.
Yeah, they have a couple
and
larger
don't have
than lives
anything,
or something.
or that they have this in their hand. It's probably way more likely that they don't have anything than they have this in their hand.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever
it's
playing
just
around this.
Gonna get people so good. I think that's kind of cool. Generally, I would go with, I guess, a little bit safer thing. But depending on the, like, this is the kind of deck where, like, I feel like you kind of need to get a little bit lucky sometimes. And, like, this adds to, like, the spikes and variance as, like, I don't think this is objectively the most powerful deck in the format by any means. So I think that deviation from what people would expect you to have is probably a good idea.
Okay.
Whereas something like Mardu or Zombies, I just want the deck to be, like, as
consistent
safe as possible. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's the idea. But keep rolling.
Alright, we're on to some spells now. We're
Rolling,
talking
rolling,
about
rolling, rolling. Attune with Ether is broken. Yeah, so 4 Attune with Ether is just like the backbone of so many decks in Standard. And obviously here, the 2 energy provided is a pump on Cub, or most of protection on Hydra, or 2 pumps on Voltaic Brawler, or 2 additional mana with Servant. So we're seeing that instead of just having like, X percentage of a card attached like it would have in some of the other decks, you can very tangibly see the bonus from it.
Yeah.
Right away here, as it can be like, oh, I'll go get a land and pump my Cub, which makes my Ronus active, which attacks you for 5, and just like it's just like so much swingier as a good card in this deck than it would be in one of the more fair decks like 4-color or Marble or something. Got 3 Harness Lightning here. We're a little bit less concerned with killing creatures as we can generally just plow through them with one of the various pump spells that we'll see on the next slide, or the Blossoming Defenses. I think Blossoming Defense is just the most powerful card in this deck.
Yeah, it's one of the most feared cards with playing against this deck, because there's a lot of points where you have to like hope they don't have it, or if they do have it, you just kind of lost the game.
I was just thinking, I was like putting away some cards earlier, and Feldar Guardian came up, and I was like, oh, I remember my old Jeskai Saheeli deck. That deck was pretty good, and then I put away a Blossoming Defense, and I was like, yeah. Basically, there were a lot of times when I was like, if my opponent has Blossoming Defense, I just can never win this game, and that's basically how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And they didn't have it very often, but when they did, it was surely backbreaking. So yeah, I think that tides over into just almost always trading for something that costs more than 1.
Yeah.
Which it really gets them too, because people are super incentivized to walk into Blossoming Defense, because you're going to use 1 mana or 2 mana or even 3 mana with Unlicensed to kill something that costs 2, 3, or 4 mana. So you're like, oh, I'm getting mana efficiency here. I'm trading my Harness Lightning for their Bristling Hydra. This is great. I'm going to do this as soon as I possibly can. And then when they have 1 mana untapped, it's just like, oh, it's right for me to go for it, and it's right for me to walk into Blossoming Defense, if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
But yeah, so I think Blossoming Defense is great for a whole bunch of different reasons, and obviously is a slam dunk 4-of in this deck.
Yeah.
Roll.
I was a little surprised talking about the 3 Harness Lightnings. The numbers on this list are a little off in my account. I just think this is a card like in this deck you always want 4 of. Like you said, you don't need as much removal because you are just running the creatures over. But still, from like an energy perspective, a deck that can utilize energy as much, I just think even at a point sometimes where this is an energy ritual, could be enough to want the 4th
Yeah, I
one.
think the idea of Harness Lightning my own Bristling Hydra in response, spend 0, get 3, protect it from a removal spell is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I think that'll happen like maybe once for every 2 times you kill a creature or something like that. You'll leave it up as a like trick.
Yeah, it's also really good if like you need that one other ritual for Pummeler to get from 10 to 20, and you know that's unexpected. So. But
like these things are generally going to happen less than you're going to just use another pump spell.
True.
And I think that's kind of the rationale behind playing 3 Harness Lightning is that we're a little bit less desperate for an actual removal spell, and as a trick or pump spell, it's certainly worse than the others. So makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. All right, and speaking of pump spells, and we're going to just call this Pumps and Tricks.
Gremlins on Parade, Invigorated Rampage, a 2-of in the main deck. Choose 1, target creature gets +4/+0 and gains trample until on the turn, or 2 target creatures each get +2/+0 and gain trample until on the turn.
Yeah, so not only does this just utilize what you want to be doing with Pummeler and giving the trample evasion, you know, being able to cast this onto a Pummeler when you have Blossoming Defensive in your hand, it's like pretty much game, because then you just need to go pump, and then they're pretty much dead. But also the second mode is kind of relevant because you're going to get to games where you're going to have a Bristling Hydra and maybe a Cub that's been gaining some counters on it from turning sideways.
Yep.
And sometimes they're going to line some blocks up and you're just going to blow them out. Thinking they're chump blocking here with a Gideon Token maybe or a Thraben Inspector.
Yeah.
And realistically, you're putting them in a position to next turn to just lose.
I think Rampage is really good in this deck for sure. But again, like I like that the numbers are kind of weird on them because kind of small because you can't really play too many of these cards in your deck.
Yeah.
They're like infect pump spells, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Larger than life, my card. +4/+4 and trample. You know, doesn't really act the same way as Rampage, obviously. We're talking about instants and sorceries. Although I will say, larger than life was when this deck first, was built, was the more prominent one that you saw a lot of lists running 3 or 4 of.
Yep.
So it's not surprising to see the split now. But the last card on here, come on. Fling.
Oh, sweet.
Just sacrifice. People cannot respond to the sacrifice. They have to deal something with the fling, which is nice.
Also, it's kind of cool that, like, you can deal first strike damage and then fling your thing if they have...
a Samet with double strike?
Oh, yeah, or, what is the other thing that gives it double strike? They don't play that card anymore?
No.
Uncaged Fury?
Yeah, that's not in this.
Oh, okay. I just assumed that card was in every nonsense Pummeler deck.
No.
But I'm wrong. I apologize. But yeah, Samet, I guess. We're gonna get in there with double strike, whatever. I just want to do every cool thing I possibly can with fling before I fling my creature at them and get its spell quellered.
Yeah. Well, that would be bad news bears. But the thing is with like having fling in your deck, like you said, the Samet talk and the numbers, the different numbers on the cards, it's like it's really hard for people to play around this. And if you're doing like combat math and you're just like, all right, well I can take a hit and then I'll line up something for my hand to be able to stabilize next turn, and now all of a sudden like you tap out to like what you think in theory stops them from being able to attack or locking them, and then they're just like fling.
Boom.
It's just great, very powerful.
Yep.
Very powerful. Das from Coverage would be proud on this one. He loves this deck. All right, we're getting into the mana now.
Yeah, we got 2 mountain, 2 forest, and 1 island. Island mostly for the sideboard cards, but
Want to have a couple basics for the Attune with Aether.
Yep. It provides a 5th basic in case you are flooding. You still something still defined that you can tap for colorless or whatever.
Yep.
And then we got 3 Sanctums, 2 Spirebluff Canals, and 1 Lumbering Fall. So these are the main dual lands. A little bit more on the green side, so to facilitate Attune, of course.
Yep.
And all the 2 drops have green mana symbols in their costs.
Yeah.
Also, like, The one that's double colored is also green, so like if you have turn 2 Brawler, like turn 1 attune for Mountain off Botanical Sanctum, play Brawler gives you all 3 colors still.
Yeah, Bristling Hydra's the only card in the deck, or at least in the main deck, that is the double
mana cost.
And green is what you said you want on turn 1 anyway for attune.
Yeah.
Here we go, some more lands. We got 4
some,
Aether Hubs.
Yep, some game trails.
3 game, no, you're good. 3 game trails and 2 Sheltered Thickets. Sheltered Thicket just to reduce the flood.
Yep, a little bit of insurance, a little bit of flood insurance for the late game, but also like reveals to game trail and provides you like just a land that taps for red and green when you need it on turn 1. Sometimes your hand is really threat heavy and you just want to play your land.
Yeah.
Get to do that. Aether Hub is obviously fantastic in this deck as it'll be some additional points of damage sometimes in addition to being like a painless City of Brass. As you have a lot of extra energy often. Like the most of the patterns with this deck that I've seen is like get a bunch of energy and a couple things in play and then just attack with my things and don't commit anything unless I have to.
Yeah.
And like that's the way they play it a lot. It's just like attack you for 3 or 4 and like force you to do something and then use all my energy to like answer it or whatever.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And also the 1 energy is definitely relevant where the only card in the deck that uses like the 1 energy is the Brawler, but having, you know, one of these early, maybe drawing one on turn 5 or 6 and getting that second energy can really be
or like a Harness Lightning that netted you an extra energy, this nets you an extra energy or whatever.
Yeah, be able to, you know, if you don't have any of the other ones, be able to like turn 2 Harness Lightning and Heart of Kieran because you have the Aether Hub.
Exactly.
It's kind of important.
Yep.
And
whoa,
the spice, some Hanwar Battlements.
This is just another Samet, or it's 2 more copies of Samet.
Yeah, it is another way, I believe, for them to just put a couple threats in play at the same time.
It's possible that Michael tested against like Fumigate a lot and was just like, I want my stuff to have haste. I'm not going to mess around with that.
Yeah, that makes
I'm
sense.
not really sure, but he used 3 effects in his main deck that give things haste.
I think
It's
if
kinda
that was
strange.
the thought process, it made a lot of sense because black-white, we saw black-white come back. We saw mid-range decks start to come back a little bit more.
We saw like the Dusk to Dawn decks.
Yeah.
Which are
the
functionally the same thing as Fumigate against this deck.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I like it.
And if the mana is as good as it is, I think you can afford to play them. So
I think the fact that you have to play this either as a checklist card or in an opaque sleeve, but have no opportunity to ever create the Writhing Township is just a huge minus for me. And I'm pretty inclined to not play it. But that's just me. I kind of
should have been 1 Handwear in the 75.
One Garrison? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. We're going to the sideboard. All right, so some value creatures and an additional Hydra in the sideboard. We got 2 Tireless Trackers and 2 Whirler Virtuosos. The Whirler's obviously doing something a little bit different, allowing you to use all that energy you gained and maybe transition your game plan from just being, hey, I'm going to make this one creature huge in attack, to being able to spread it out.
Well, yeah, you're just going to see a lot of like spot removal and dispels and negates and stuff like that to prevent them from getting comboed.
Yes.
So then something like Tracker, get a couple clues, or Whirler, make a few tokens, go wide is always... You're just going to generally morph into like a Teamer Energy deck post-board.
Yeah, you want to
As a Teamer Energy deck is like a little bit better against removal, a little bit worse at being a combo deck, but that's okay because your opponent has made their deck a little bit worse against a general proactive plan. So that's the idea behind it.
Makes sense. Another Bristling Hydra, just a great card for the deck. If it had room, I think it would play all 4 somewhere in the 75.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best energy cards, but the banning of Marvel has like kind of allowed like generic counter spells to like kind of float back into the format. We're seeing sensors in different ways, and we're seeing like main deck negates again because people are like terrified of planeswalkers and stuff.
Yeah.
There's no Marvels to keep those in check. So the main deck negates that we saw when there was Marvel are still there, weirdly, but they're there for a different reason now. And I don't know, Hydra seems good.
Some more creatures. We have another Samet.
Another Samet. When
Another
you
one.
can't have just one.
Another one. Yeah, exactly.
And
2
another
Glory
one.
Bringers.
Yeah, so this makes perfect sense. Again, we're just gonna turn into a good stuff deck. All their, sweltering suns and weird stuff like that they might have boarded in against your Cubs and Servants and all that. will fly in the face of Glorybringer, and you can even bring in these Glorybringers to get through a Resolve Kozilek's Return or something like that. You only need one pump spell to do it. Like Glorybringer plus Blossoming Defense beats Kozilek's Return, which is something that people might care about.
Yeah, I really like Glorybringer too because, like you're saying, after sideboard when it gets a little harder to, use your plan A because they're going to bring in some more removal spells maybe for your early drops. This is going to provide you not only a source to just win the game with a 4/4 flying haste, but more removal. Whereas like this list in particular was only running the 3 harnesses. So it allows you to have a way to maybe attack Gideon, attack Chandra, while also being able to kill a threat.
Other thing is, if you end up in like racing situations, I think it's generally better to just keep committed creatures versus keep up mana for pump spells. Because like, if you decide to keep up mana, like you can't play something else to keep up your pump spells. And if you decide to use your pump spells, they can just like kill the creature if it doesn't kill them on the next turn or whatever.
Sure.
And then you fall behind in the race, whereas like, the pattern of just applying a new threat every turn and making them try to kill it just facilitates you like just getting in a situation where you have 1 or 2 things left and a couple pump spells left over.
Yeah.
So like the boarding in a bunch of like expensive sorcery speed creatures is good because you're just going to keep jamming things in post board games, and I like the way that the deck plays out for that.
Okay.
I don't understand Samet though. I'm sorry, I still don't understand it.
Other creatures have haste, man.
Oh, there you go. You're bringing in Samet and Glorybringer, and then you're boarding in all these sweepers.
Yeah.
I like this play pattern too.
So we got the sweepers. I believe the Monument deck was on the radar. The Zombies was on the radar. Not really great versus Mardu, right? They're not really trying to play that kind of play.
Sweepers, I think, are good. They're decent against Temur Energy. You could also just like pump your Pummeler twice, sweep the board away, and kill them with it.
Yeah, that's a
which
cool
is
play.
something that they might be doing in post board games. Also, you can like Radiant Flames for 1, Radiant Flames for 2, with keep your X3s alive or whatever. You can do things like that. I think these are generally going to be for zombies. You'd probably bring them in against the Monument deck, but I don't really. I mean, they are good, but I would expect the Monument deck to change post board. Have Gideons, have counter spells.
Yeah,
stuff
not only
like
that, these are kind of tempo cards because if you Sweltering Suns and then, like you said before, they just have Dawn Dusk, and they're just going to get them back, it's just not the game plan.
Also, like, you just want to just kill them with your combos and stuff. Like, the Monument deck has minimal removal and only has a few spell quellers.
Sure.
And rebukes and stuff, so I think that, like, generally, you can put them in a tough spot with your pump spells and your hydras and stuff. You don't really need to be trying to sweep their board as, like, between Selfless Spirits and spell quellers, like, I don't even know that the sweepers are particularly good against them, and I don't know that that's the game you want to play.
Yeah.
Like, you just slow down, sweep them, and they play Gideon or something like that. It just seems like a bad idea. I don't know, but they're certainly good against zombies, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And this is, we see 2 negates. This is the only blue card in the list. We went out of our way to put an island in our deck, even though we have a Tune with Aether. Still kind of somewhat of a cost, I think. Why is it in here?
It's good. It's just good against Fatal Push, Unlicensed Disintegration. If someone has Deliverance or something like that for the Pummeler. Just an unconditional removal spell that kills it independent of
Deals with Fumigates.
Yeah, it also deals with things like Dusk to Dawn and Fumigate that are like on a more global scale.
Okay.
But then has the flip side of being, Vines of Ashwood or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Which is nice. I think this spell is generally better as Vines of Ashwood. And, in that role of protect your threat from removal.
Yeah.
But this is much broader, and the format is pretty broad now. As people are doing things like Dawn to Dusk, and they're Dusk to Dawn, whatever. They're doing things like Gideon. They're doing things like, 4 mana Chandra. They're doing 6 mana Chandras. So, like, you need to really just have, like, a whole wide range of things that you can do.
Yeah.
And I think that that's generally a good strategy to have. So I like the negates here.
Yeah, it's worth the additional mana, I believe, as well.
We slide along to the next slide, or is that it?
That's it. Final
That's
thoughts.
it. Wow.
All right. Well, we have Cincinnati coming up this weekend. The first
new set.
Standard. We have a new
Hour
set
of
out.
Devastation.
What do we like from the new set that we could be
Have
an
you
auto
read
influence?
the card Hour of Devastation yet?
Yes.
It's like a ridiculous magic card. I didn't
3
realize
double
this.
red, 5 damage to all creatures and planeswalkers.
And non-bolus planeswalkers.
non-bolus planeswalkers.
And
yeah.
all creatures lose indestructible.
Yep.
What
It's
a
really-
crazy card that is.
It's red hasn't had one of these in a while.
No,
we
it's
haven't
sweet.
had like a wildfire Jokel Hops type of thing, and this as it doesn't get rid of lands.
It'd be sweet if it got rid of lands.
Well, it'd be something. Sweet's. I'm the kind of guy that likes to play Braids in Commander, but
I mean, you just end up in a weird situation where you're like, all right, Wildfire, all my lands and all your lands, I have a Planeswalker play. They're like, float 5, and you're like, okay, and they're like, all right, all my stuff dies. Avacyn, kill your Planeswalker, kill you with it. We both have nothing in play. Like,
so do you think Hour of Devastation has a home in Pummeler?
No.
Not at all.
But I do think there's other cards in Hour of Devastation that have a home in Pummeler.
Alright.
That was a bizarre way to lead it in, but I just thought that card was cool and kind of unusual as far as the cards they've been printing recently. I think that the defeats are pretty solid. I could even see playing the blue one as it's fine against something like blue-red control and might even be good enough against something like the Monument deck or Teamer Marvel.
Yeah, I
Although
think
less likely to be good there. Or not Teamer Marvel, Teamer Energy, sorry.
I think we just talked about this. We were talking about Abide when we were in the early section of the
Abrade?
deck. Abrade, excuse me, Abide. And destroying the Pummeler while also like shooting 3 damage to the creatures when you tap out on turn 2.
Yeah, Abrade is certainly going to be played, and it's certainly going to probably hurt the stock of this deck with regards to the rest of the format. But I think that people generally doing weird things is probably kind of bad for this deck anyway.
Yeah.
As you'd think at first glance that like this deck is good against people doing weird things, so that people like won't always do them correctly and they'll stumble, and people stumbling is good for this deck.
Okay.
Which is true, but like the other thing that people do when they do weird things is just put a bunch of removal in their deck. And that's kind of bad for this deck too.
Yeah,
so
this deck's not really trying to play against the deck that has like 16
I mean, this deck
spells.
doesn't want to play against like Deep Fiend, sacking Stitchwing Scab, flashing back Kozilek's Return.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So it also doesn't want to play against like Dusk to Dawn or like a bunch of Fumigates and Transgress the Minds and something like that. Grasp the Darkness, Fatal Push, all that stuff. That deck is probably good against this deck too. And I think people will try stuff like that. But I also think that there's some cards that are decent for this deck. The Red Defeat is probably pretty good. Knocking down opposing Glorybringers, knocking down Brawlers in the Mirror, or something like 4-mana Chandra. Come down, minus, kill your creature. You don't have a way to kill it, so they just defeat.
Yeah,
life.
it's Whirler Virtuoso.
Whirler Virtuoso is another thing you can hit, for sure. I don't know that it'll see too much play, but I do think that you can kill something for 1 red is a totally justifiable thing.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think that if you have room in the sideboard for like 1 or 2 of these, I think you definitely want to. With pretty much everything else that we've said, I think Dispel. We just got done talking about this. Is a card that you're going to see probably if this deck continues to splash the 3rd color, 1 or 2 copies.
Does the green defeat, does it kill a creature? No, right?
No, I don't believe so.
It's forest, green, permanent, or planeswalker?
Planeswalker, forest. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It might kill a creature. Well, anyway, that card's great. If it kills a creature, it's definitely great. If it doesn't kill a creature, it's fine because there might be a ramp deck and you can just Stone Rain them.
Yeah.
Stone Raining them is totally cool when you have a bunch of threats in your deck and they have a bunch of Ulamogs and stuff that you don't want them to cast. So
I don't know what deck's casting Ulamog these days, but
I think there's going to be a ramp deck.
Alright.
Like Beneath the Sands is Ramping Growth with Cycling. Spring to Mind is Ramping Growth with Upside. So I think we'll see these cards.
Interesting.
In
Spring to
Standard.
mind. Oh.
I think you'll also see like maybe just like Hedron Archives and dumb stuff like that.
Sure.
The Hour of, what is it? Hour of Promise? Is that what it's called?
The
Like
green one?
5 mana, Rampant Growth,
Yep.
and get 2 zombies or 3 zombies if you have deserts or something like that.
Yeah, you gotta have deserts.
You have to have 3 deserts to get 2 zombies, right? That's what the card does? I hope that's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll see some cards like that, and it's always nice to be able to stunt their growth a little bit, negate, and Stone Rain can do that.
All right. Well, that's gonna do it for this deck of the week. Pummeler action.
Oh, we can play
Green
green
color.
too.
And we'll see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel.
We'll have a
with
deck
a new deck
that's
from
legal
Cincinnati.
in a format after Cincinnati, right?
Yeah.
We might have a deck from Cincinnati even.
Yeah.
Because we got
Hopefully.
Atlanta coming up the week after that.
It's true.
3-format team construction.
It's true.
So
It'll be
sweet.
interesting to see some stuff. So until then, we'll see you next week with the deck of the week.
Thank you.
fighters are ready. Daddy is ready. The refs are ready. Are you ready?
Draft exemplar on turn 2. Attack you for 7.
Whoa.
We'll see
Have
you
a
next
good one,
week.
guys. Thank
12:30. We'll be back and better than ever. Oh, I'm doing a dab.